Hey, I got a question for you. Is it better to start a mix in stereo and convert it to Dolby, or is it better to mix in Dolby and create a stereo mix? In this video, we'll take a look at the pros and cons of mixing in stereo and then converting the stems to Dolby Atmos. This is Alex Pro Mix. Let's go. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Alex Pro Mix, your favorite channel here on YouTube to learn Dolby Atmos and stereo mixing and mastering. If you're new to the world of Dolby Atmos music, you want to check out my blog. I wrote an article called How to Experience Dolby Atmos Music. This article will show you step-by-steps on downloading exercise files of mixes that I've done and how you can experience Dolby Atmos on headphones, on iPhone if you're using iOS devices, and I've also included a file that you can put on a thumb drive and pop it into your favorite soundbar or TV if you have a home theater system. This will give you an introduction and an idea what Dolby Atmos sounds like when mixing music. Now, the purpose of this video is to talk about the benefits of mixing in stereo first. Stereo recorded music has been around since the 1970s. It's a proven format for recording and distributing music. It's been around for decades. And recording engineers and mixers have developed techniques that work great when mixing in stereo. So we don't want to put off all the great benefits of mixing in stereo just yet. However, Dolby Atmos creates a new immersive experience and it future-proofs your music. So it's good to know the benefits of both mixing in stereo and mixing in Dolby Atmos. And you're going to come across different paths. You're going to have a different end result when you start in stereo and then go up into Dolby Atmos than when you start in Dolby Atmos and downstream into stereo. However, in this video, we're going to talk about the benefits of stereo and mixing in stereo. So let's dive in. So here in Pro Tools, we have a multi-track project. As you can see, I have individual channels for drums, bass, percussions, electric guitars, vocals, and just about everything else. This is a typical stereo mix. The multi-tracks are unmixed. That means that they have no processing. They were sent over from the producer, and my job as an engineer, as a pro mixer, is to create a commercial sounding mix in stereo. Once this mix is approved by the client, I would then take these stems, print all the effects that I have on the drums and the percussions, loops, and everything else, and bring it into a new session and create a Dolby Atmos mix and master. But before we get there, let's talk about some of the benefits of mixing in stereo. I would say one of the biggest benefits is mix revisions and feedback. What do I mean? Well, we all know what stereo sounds like. We've experienced stereo for years. We know what it sounds like on headphones. We listen to music in the car, which is stereo because that's left and right channel. Even though you might have multiple speakers, the stereo receiver in your car outputs stereo left and stereo right. We know what stereo sounds like on a TV and also using the speakers on your mobile device or phone. So we all know what stereo sounds like. As a mix engineer, when I send the stereo file to my clients to approve and to give revisions, they can open the attachment on email, experience the song on MP3 on their laptop, give me their feedbacks, and I can continue working on the mix. Dolby Atmos doesn't work quite like that. Dolby Atmos is a multi-channel format. You can't just simply send it over email and experience it and listen to it on your computer. Instead, you need to have a special software or playback device, such as a receiver, to be able to experience a Dolby Atmos mix or file. That's why I wrote the article, How to Experience Dolby Atmos, and I'll leave a link on the video below. The second benefit of mixing in stereo would be the respective audio loudness or loudness target. Up until recent years, there hasn't been a real loudness standard for stereo mixes. You can mix a song as loud as you want. When you give it to a DJ, they're going to turn it up or down if they're playing it along other songs. If you upload it to a streaming service, it will turn it up or down based on its loudness. So there hasn't been really like a specification of target loudness for mixing in stereo. In fact, some music genres such as Afrobeats, dancehall, and even electronic music, EDM music, have really, really loud masters. And that's part of the grit, that's part of the character of the genre. However, in Dolby, there is a loudness specification of -18 dB full scale, which does result in more clarity, more fidelity, more dynamics in the mix. But it creates a new challenge, which is our third point, the existence of a mix bus. So here in the session, I have all these multi-tracks going to a master channel, which is this one right here. This is a channel master, left and right, 2-channel master. If I want my mix to sound bright, all I gotta do is put a plugin on here, put like an equalizer, like a Pultec, crank up the treble, and all of a sudden my mix sounds bright. If I wanted to add more bass to my mix, I can just go to the low end, boost the low end, and my big bass comes through on the stereo mix. If I wanted to squeeze the dynamics, I can put a compressor. If I wanted to make my mix louder, I can put a limiter and crank it up and make it loud. However, in Dolby Atmos, this doesn't really exist. The reason why this works in stereo is because all these individual channels, basically everything before the master channel, gets summed into the master channel. So any processing that I have on here affects the sound and the tone of my mix. However, in Dolby Atmos, you have 128 independent channels that are not really linked to each other. Sure, you can link plugins in the DAW and adjust EQ globally or use a phantom track to trigger sidechain compression, but it's not as simple as it sounds. So here in the renderer, you basically have a 3D space. And you have 128 channels. The first 10 channels are assigned to what's called the bed. This is a 7.1.2 bed. And there are some plugins that support that, where you can put a limiter across this bed. But for most engineers who are now mixing music in Atmos, they're ignoring the bed, they're using objects. So you basically have 128 independent locations where you can put guitars in front of you, effects above you, pads behind you, vocals at the 90-degree angle to make them wide. And so there's no place here or in Pro Tools or Logic or Nuendo where you can just add a limiter and it affects all the channels. So there is no mix bus compression or there is no mix bus processing when mixing in Dolby Atmos. So one of the things that I've learned as of recent is that I have to sort of rely less and less on my mix bus processing when I'm mixing in stereo, because when I convert that mix to Dolby Atmos, I don't want it to sound so different from the mix that the client approved. Let me explain further. Let's say that in this mix bus processing or this master, I'm using EQ, I'm using a widener, I'm using a multi-band compressor, and I'm using a limiter. I'm creating the best possible stereo mix that I can for my client, and they like it, they approve it, they love it. But the moment I take all these plugins off, the mix sounds different. It might not sound as bright, it might lack a little bit of low end, maybe there's some low mids now that are in the mix that weren't there before. And so now I have to counterbalance that when I'm mixing in Dolby Atmos. So one of the biggest challenges for engineers is to develop new techniques to create punchy, loud sounding mixes without relying on a single plugin or a single limiter. So with those points in mind, let me walk you guys through what I do when I finish my stereo mix and how I prep it before I start mixing in Dolby Atmos. So here's a session where the client approved the mix, they love it, we did all the automation changes, and they don't want any more changes. At this point, I would take all these individual tracks and create stems. So in my mixing template, I have some files where basically all these multi-tracks get assigned to stem groups. So I'll go ahead and show you guys what that looks like. So these blue tracks are the printed stems from my multi-track session. If you look at it, everything is stereo. All the drums have been printed, percussions, bass, guitars. Basically all the multi-tracks have gone to their own appropriate groups, and now I have mixed stems of the mix that the client approved. From this point, I would take these mixed stems and start a new mix or start a new session and mix it in Dolby Atmos. Dolby Atmos will enable me the ability to take the acoustic guitars, for example, and make them appear wider in the mix. So instead of relying on the front, left, and right speakers that are at a 30-degree angle, I can pan them into the room at 45 degrees or even 90 degrees and make the guitar super wide if I wish to do so, and if I feel that that's what's right for the mix. Likewise, instruments like pads and synths, I can pan them behind me. I can pan them between the side speakers and the rear speakers and give this illusion that the pads and the synths are kind of just hugging me, or like they're just kind of hovering over my right shoulder. Same thing for cymbals, same thing for sound effects. In Dolby, I can take a sound effect like a riser, and as it swells up, I can pan it from the rear of the room to the front, and it's going to give the appearance of something coming at you or coming through you and going in front of you. So being able to take a stereo mix, finish the mix, send it to the client for mix revisions. They can play that on their email, they can play that in the car or on their phone. They approve it. Once they approve it, I would create stems, and these stems would be my starting point for creating a Dolby Atmos mix. The benefit of that is that the client is familiar with the mix, they already approved all the changes, and now I don't have to worry about vocal tuning, automation, effects, sends, levels, or anything like that, because all the tonal changes have been approved and accepted by the client. At this point, I would create a Dolby Atmos mix that would sound good in my room, that would sound good on headphones, and then send them a file for approval. And what I've discovered is that once the stereo mix is finalized and it's approved, the Dolby Atmos master usually just takes one revision and it's done. So that's really the benefit of mixing in stereo first and then converting the mix to Dolby Atmos. So for example, here's the stereo mix that the client approved, now converted to Dolby Atmos. And when I hit play, you're gonna see a lot of things happening on the screen. You're gonna see some automation written, and this is mostly on the percussions and some of the sound effects. You're gonna see some instrument elements spaced out around the listener. If I change the view, you see that most of these things are in the boundary of the listening environment. Some things are panned center, some things are panned high, some things are in between speakers. So by mixing in Dolby Atmos and taking the mix stems from stereo to Dolby Atmos gives me the benefit of creating an immersive listening experience. Additionally, when the client publishes the stereo master and the Dolby Atmos file, the music player, Apple Music, Tidal, or Amazon will automatically switch between the two files based on what devices you have connected to your phone. And so this gives the artist the ability to future-proof their music by providing both stereo and Dolby Atmos masters. So in summary, working in stereo is still absolutely valid. Clients can check mixes, you can compete for loudness, especially if you're competing in certain genres of music, and you can take advantage of mix bus processing by using your favorite EQ or compressor, both analog or digital. However, there are some benefits for starting a mix in Dolby Atmos and downscaling it to stereo, but I'll leave that for another video. Thanks again, guys, so much for watching. My name is Alex here on Alex Pro Mix, your favorite channel on YouTube to learn Dolby Atmos and stereo mixing and mastering. If this is your first time watching, I invite you to subscribe, like, and share. Drop me a comment below. Also, I've left a free download for you on my tips and techniques for mixing vocals. You can find that on the download link below of this video. Thanks again so much for watching. I'll see you again real soon. Peace.